Yep, the NFL draft happened, and well, I don't know about you, but it it had all these high expectations coming into it. There's going to be a ton of movement in the top 10. It was a complete dud for me. There was
Well, I saw some speculation on that. I'm gonna say it wasn't a complete dud. We had some movement, and we had obviously something shocking out of the top 10. But the draft is always a draft. People always get so hyped for it, and then by an hour in, you realize it's the same thing. It's talking heads breaking down the picks, and I think what affected people like yourself, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I also think the fact that your hometown and your favorite team not having a first round pick lessens the excitement by a long mile.
actually in this case, no, that has nothing to do with it because the Browns haven't had a first round pick for the past couple years because of the Deshaun Watson trade, which, contrary to what I've heard other fans say, the Houston Texans won the Deshaun Watson trade in a landslide. But the Browns not having a first round pick had nothing to do with it for me. Like,
So So of course we are here on Twitter at Rings Champion. We are on Instagram at Rings Champion. We're on Facebook at Rings Champion 216. Our YouTube channel is Ring Champions 216. Josh, you talked about the Browns not having a first round pick because they traded away three firsts for a quarterback. We had six quarterbacks go in the top 12, as I had predicted last week here on Championship Rings in my personal mock draft. And no matter if the order was correct or not, I did nail five of the six landing spots for those six quarterbacks. I had obviously we all predicted Caleb Williams going to Chicago. The consensus was Jaden Daniels was going to Washington. I did have Drake May in my personal mock draft going number three to the New England Patriots. I also did have JJ McCarthy going to the Vikings, so I thought the Vikings would have to trade up more than they did to get him. And I had Bo Nix actually at number 12. Some people were shocked at that pick. I was not. Denver needed a quarterback. I think Bo Nix is Sean Payton's guy. The shocking one is obviously the one that we'll get into, that being Michael Penix, who the Atlanta Falcons took at number 8. They did not have to trade up, they did not have to trade down. They stayed pat, and instead of taking a defensive player, I know you had thought maybe the Colts could move in that spot and grab a wide receiver, which they did not. They waited till round number 2. But at the end of the day, Michael Penix is the new quarterback, potentially of the Atlanta Falcons, whether it be this year, next year, 3 years from now.
yeah, they are basing this fully off of the way it worked out with Jordan Love in Green Bay. Guess what? Jordan Love was 20 years old when the Packers drafted him. I think Michael Penix is like 20.
He's 25 right now.
Yeah, completely different. And why did you pay Kirk Cousins the huge contract if you were just going to turn around and draft his eventual replacement in the first round? It's stupid. You had
So
a glaring hole on defense. You had all the defensive players to choose from. And you go quarterback?
So this is listen. I think we were all shocked at what happened Thursday night, myself included. We all couldn't believe it in the moment. But I actually think when you sit down and you think about what the Atlanta Falcons did and you really analyze it, it was actually the right decision to draft Michael Penix.
Ha!
And
No, it
let me
wasn't.
and let me explain why. Kirk Cousins signed a 4 year deal. You know how much that contract really is? It's a 2 year contract. If you actually look at the terms of the contract, it is a front loaded contract for Kirk Cousins where he's essentially going to play 1 to 2 very good years, and then Atlanta's going to move off of him. And Atlanta realizes that right now they are in a prime position. Tampa, Baker Mayfield's a good quarterback, but he's often not consistent year to year. Carolina, I like what they did in the draft. I actually think Bryce Young could turn it around, but he could still be a massive bust, and Carolina could be in the doldrums for years. I don't like the direction the New Orleans Saints are in right now. I think Atlanta's in a perfect position. Michael Penix, who also has an injury history, by the way, we know he tore his ACL twice in college, but we also know Kirk Cousins is coming off a torn Achilles. We don't know how healthy Kirk Cousins is going to be. Right now, we don't even know if Kirk Cousins is going to be healthy enough to start week 1. And so, with that in mind, it is on the board currently today as we sit May 2nd, 2024. Michael Penix is your week 1 starter for the Atlanta Falcons. And you could make an argument the situation he's in, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, that they added Rondell Moore. They have a very good top 10 offensive line in the week. That Atlanta, while they needed a pass rusher, and yes, they tried to trade back up reportedly in the first round, they did get some defensive players later on in the draft. That we know what is the most important position in the NFL, quarterback. If you have one, you win a lot of games, no matter how bad your defense is. If you don't have one, you're not going to win a lot of games. And so Atlanta took a calculated risk, and I believe it has the chance to really pay off because after Kirk Cousins, when you don't have a succession plan, now you do.
Raheem, they just hired Raheem Morris. I think he's already on the clock with this pick. Um, Even if Michael Penix doesn't play right away, when he does, it better we better see results because
Now that
otherwise,
I agree with, but I think, and we're going to get into this a little bit later. I just mentioned it. I think Michael Penix is in a very good situation, and I think it was the worst kept secret of the week that teams like Vegas, teams like Seattle, teams like the Giants were trying to trade up to get this guy because I think teams wanted it to be a smokescreen that they did not view him as a first round talent. When some teams may have viewed him even more talented wise than Drake May.
yeah, I, the Raiders were probably shocked at number 13 when all six quarterbacks were off the board. Um, so I don't know who's going to throw the ball to Brock Bowers.
Well, it is going to be Gardner Minshew. And let me say this about Vegas. I like their entire roster except quarterback. I mean, you look at that roster. Their secondary obviously needs work, but weapons wise, you got Devontae Adams, you got Jacoby Myers, you got Michael Mayer, you got Brock Bowers, you have Christian Wilkins, who just came over from Miami, Max Crosby, Tyree Wilson, their first round pick from a year ago. They have a left tackle in Colton Miller. I mean, so left tackle, pass rush, weapons, boxes, check, check, check. Gardner Minshew is not a terrible NFL quarterback. Look what he did last year with the Indianapolis Colts. We thought the Colts were dead and out of the doldrums, and he took them to the last game of the regular season.
Yes, but think about the division the Raiders
That
are in.
that was my next point. Now in this division, now you got to deal with Andy Reid. You got to deal with Jim Harbaugh. You got to deal with Sean Payton. Who, by the way, I think Bo Nix will start week 1 for Denver. I think he has a chance to be successful here in his rookie season. So if I'm Vegas, I'm taking a look at it, and I think that Vegas is going to compete. They're probably a fourth place team, but where they were at in the draft, they knew going in the only way to get a quarterback was for them to trade up. And so when they weren't able to do that, because obviously Denver was targeting on Bo Nix, and I don't think Vegas really wanted Bo Nix. I think the guy they wanted was Penix. Why not take the best tight end on the board in Brock Bowers? I know you already have Michael Mayer. It's where I thought the first defensive player on the board will go. But you cannot deny, man, I think maybe the best tight end ever come out of college, maybe besides George Kittle and Gronk, is Brock Bowers. And I think he's going to be a hell of a weapon for whoever eventually Vegas gets as their starting quarterback.
Yes, but you only mentioned half of the equation. Yes, you have to deal with Andy Reid. Yes, you have to deal with Jim Harbaugh. And yes, Sean Payton. But you are also competing with, I don't know, Patrick Mahomes,
Who, by the
Justin.
way, just got another speedster thanks to the Buffalo Bills. I
Yeah,
guarantee you that pick is going to hit.
yes,
Um,
Justin Herbert, who I think Jim Harbaugh is going to make into an awesome quarterback.
And I think the Chargers, well, I'll say this. I think the Chargers' identity is going to change this year. They brought in Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, both from Baltimore. The offensive coordinator, Greg Roman, was Jim Harbaugh's OC in San Francisco. He was also obviously the OC in Baltimore there. They took Joe Alt, who we all pretty much pegged to go to Tennessee at left tackle. He's going to move over to right tackle. And I think Jim Harbaugh's thinking is, listen, I'm in a division with Kansas City and a high flying offense and a very good defense. I may not be able to stop them a ton, but what I can do is run the football. And with my very good quarterback that does not turn the football over, we are going to bully and beat up in physical Kansas City and control the clock and keep the game low scoring. I actually see Herbert putting up very, if you will, pedestrian, maybe managing the game quarterback numbers this year. And I think the Chargers are going to turn into a pound the rock football team, even with Herbert at the quarterback position.
Okay. And then you look at Denver. I think the reason they picked Bo Nix is because Sean Payton sees his next Drew Brees.
Yes, he has a lot of those qualities. He had 60 starts in college, five offensive coordinators in 5 years. So he's a very smart guy. He can understand plays, and he does what Russell Wilson doesn't do, which is, uh, run the play on time as it's designed, doesn't roll out of the pocket. Denver's got weapons. They don't have the best weapons in the world, but Cortland Sutton is still there. Javonte Williams is still there. Their offensive line was rebuilt last year. They got to get some help on the front end. Obviously, they still got Simmons and Surtain on the back end. But I think this Denver team, what people forget, they won, 8 games or so last year with good numbers from Russ, but very managing the game like numbers. Bo Nix can do that and more. Denver's probably an 8 or 9 win team next year.
But that's my point, though, is you look at the quarterback head coach combinations the Raiders have to deal with. I like Pierce as their head coach, don't get me wrong, but the Raiders don't have a quarterback. The reason Gardner Minshew played so well is because he was the backup quarterback last year. Now he's going to
This
be
is true.
he's going to be the starter. That's different responsibilities. I get it. Gardner Minshew became the starter in Indianapolis, and he ended up starting most of the games, but he was still the backup quarterback.
And you never know what you're going to get from Gardner Minshew week in, week out. What was your thoughts before we move on to a couple of drives that we liked, a couple of drives that we didn't like? What are your thoughts on, we saw the Colts. You thought they were going to take a receiver, and I tried arguing with you. I said, I don't think they're taking a receiver in round one. Reports were the receiver they actually wanted was not a receiver. They tried to trade up and get Bowers, but they could not obviously make that trade happen. But they're the one that at pick 14 take the
15.
first, or 15, yes, take the first defensive player off the board.
This pick surprised me a little bit because, I mean, you look at what they have offensively. Yes, they have Jonathan Taylor, Alec Pierce, and Michael Pittman, but that's not enough offensively when you got the likes of um, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, uh, Dalton Schultz, and everything Houston has. And then you look at what Jacksonville has, Travis Etienne. They still have Christian Kirk. They drafted Brian Thomas. So I was thinking the Colts needed another skill position player like a Roma Dunze to try and keep
Which
up with.
they did go out though in the second, third, fourth round. They drafted receivers. Tank Dell was a third round pick last year. So Puka Nakua was a fifth round pick. You can find receivers in other parts of the draft. This was just in my opinion, it was 3 top receivers and then a huge drop off, which is why I defended Indianapolis going after. I thought Dallas Turner personally was the best pick. That's why I like what Minnesota did. But you can't deny that Owufu from UCLA is probably going to be a very good player for them.
Yeah, Leatu Foitanu, I think is how you say it.
So let's get into some of the drafts that we did and did not like. For me, and again, I may be biased here, but I think Howie Roseman, once again, of the Philadelphia Eagles, had a great draft. I did not expect. I really like the pick of Quinyon Mitchell at number 22. I didn't expect him to be there. That was the guy that I thought Indy would take at 15. So the fact that he was there to me was a no-brainer, and I absolutely did not think Cooper DeJean was going to make it in the second round, let alone to pick 40. Shout out to all our white cornerbacks out there that are alive, who are now both in the National Football League. But for the Philadelphia Eagles, to be able to go from maybe the worst secondary in the history of the National Football League last year, where they were just getting tortured upon, new defensive coordinator Vic Fangio comes in. You get two automatic game-changing man-to-man corners to go with Darius Slay, to go with the return of C.J. Gardner-Johnson in the secondary, to go with a guy like Reed Blankenship, a guy like Kiwi Ringo, who they drafted last year out of Georgia. All of a sudden, I think this Eagles defense, and I also think another underrated pick was Jeremy Trotter Jr., the son of the former Pro Bowl linebacker for Philly, who I think will absolutely work in that organization. I think all of a sudden, this Eagles team, you look at the additions they made, as I told you earlier this offseason, I'm not going to say Super Bowl, but I think there's a real chance my team rebounds and has a very good year next year.
So my biggest winner, I'm just gonna go a couple hours. I think it's east of Philadelphia to Pittsburgh. I thought the Steelers hit a home run with this draft. They shored up their offensive line, and then they go out and get a guy that when Michigan needed a touchdown, if they weren't running it to Blake Corum, they were throwing it to Roman Wilson most of the time. And I think Pittsburgh had a solid draft. I really like what the Steelers did.
I
Let me
think all of the AFC North had a great draft.
Yes. Let me give you one more winner. The LA Rams. Welcome, first of all, welcome back to the first round, LA Rams. It was their first round pick since I think it was 2016 when they
Since
drafted.
Jared Goff.
Yes. And they go out and you have to replace the legendary Aaron Donald somehow. I know you don't think Aaron Donald is a legend, which is absolutely bonkers.
I didn't say he was a legend. I just said he was a little bit overrated than the best defensive player of all time.
And I still say that's bonkers. But whatever. They just go out and casually get Jared Verse, and then in the second round, they go grab his teammate to try and shore up that defensive line. Yeah, as much as I hate the Rams because Stan Kroenke screwed over the city of St. Louis, I got to give them credit on this one because they nailed the draft too.
Not to mention the running back Blake Corum, who
Yes.
I thought for sure, and I was nervous because I thought for sure if he did not go there, I don't know if you noticed, but in the second round, the Eagles traded up and they had one pick ahead of the Cowboys. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Philly took the Clemson running back in the fourth round because I actually think Howie Rosen wanted to take Blake Corum and won't tell anybody to get him away from Dallas because that's who I had Dallas taking in the second round, and it would have scared me to death. Speaking of a draft that I did not love, and again, no bias here, but I did not understand the Dallas Cowboys draft at all. They drafted linemen, they drafted a wide receiver late, and they did not draft a running back at all. Instead, it's Jerry Jones bringing back what I call his son, Ezekiel Elliott, to come back and pretty much start for them at running back. And to me, Dallas is a CeeDee Lamb injury away from being a pop gun offense. They have no other skill position players besides really Ferguson, the tight end. They have no running game whatsoever. It's going to be very Dak dependent. And I think the Commanders had one hell of a draft. I think a very underrated draft. They got some defensive pieces along with a couple of receivers, including the brother of Christian McCaffrey to go out and pair with Jaden Daniels. I think Washington can all of a sudden be a sneaky team. And if Dallas falls down a little bit, Washington comes up. I think the Cowboys, old DC, Dan Quinn, and the Commanders may be in line to take second place in my division, the NFC East.
If the Giants had drafted a quarterback, I would have said maybe they could jump up, but
Well, listen, the Giants don't have any weapons, so even if they drafted a quarterback, it wouldn't have worked. And I don't want Malik Neighbors, as I said last week. So I'm happy what the Giants did. The Giants, as I will tell you, are now the new Cleveland Browns.
you know, I know we're talking about teams that had duds in terms of draft, which I would go with the Buffalo Bills on that one. You trade out twice in the first round. First of all, you traded with the Kansas City Chiefs. How did that work out the first time? Oh, I don't know. You allowed the Chiefs to get Patrick Mahomes and he's torched you. Then you trade out to the Chiefs again and you allow them to get the fastest wide receiver in the draft. Good luck with that. Then they trade out again to the Carolina Panthers who go get a wide receiver. I don't get what Buffalo did. But I want to give one quick shout out to the Detroit Lions because
They rebuilt. They did what Philly did. I want their draft too. They rebuilt their secondary in one draft.
Yeah, and they screwed over the Packers again. It was hilarious. I think it's becoming a yearly draft tradition where the Lions trade up just to screw over the Packers because it happened this year with Arnold and um who was it that they traded up for last year? Oh,
Well,
it was the
there was Campbell, the outside linebacker, and then there was Gibbs.
no, it was Branch. It was
Oh, Deion Branch in the second round. Yeah,
yes. Yep, the Lions traded up because I
or
think the
Brian Branch, not
yes,
Deion. I was thinking of the receiver. I'm sorry.
yes, yeah. Brian Branch. I swear it's becoming a yearly draft tradition for the Lions to trade up in front of the Packers and go draft the guy the Packers wanted. Because I bet you the Packers wanted both Brian Branch and Arnold. So
Speaking of that division, the Lions we know are loaded. I think Chicago may be the most improved team in the league next year. I think they're absolutely loaded. And I think that team's going to be really good. I think Minnesota has some of the best offensive pieces, and I think JJ McCarthy is going to fit really well in that scheme. And so for me, the question really is, we all loved Green Bay at the end of last year. But I am starting to think now, and we'll wait till the schedule comes out, whether it's this week or next week, and I go through it and make my official predictions. But there is a world out there, in my opinion, where we all got hyped about Green Bay at the end of last year. What is their projection? Because we see this in the NFL all the time. We always think teams are going to go up and up and up, and then they don't always do that. Green Bay could go from, hey, we got a real chance to knock out the Lions in this division to them being back in the basement with 9 wins, them being essentially the Steelers or the Bengals or the Browns from last year in the AFC North.
they're the NFC North is going to be the most interesting division in the NFL.
I think it's overtaken the AFC North as the best division in football from 1 to 4.
It definitely, you could definitely make an argument for that. I would still give the slight edge to the AFC North because I need to see Chicago take that next step. Um, and I want to see what Minnesota looks like with JJ McCarthy as quarterback for
That's
them.
fair. To be honest with you, I am projecting they both take big steps up, and I am projecting, unfortunately for us, that our hometown Browns take a little step back. No slight of their own. I just think their schedule in particular is very difficult, and we have to see where those games land. Their home schedule is a murderer's row. I mean, outside of the Saints and Giants, there's no easy game on there.
Well,
So
yeah, but except the Saints game is in New Orleans, not
oh, it did. For some reason, I thought the Saints game was in Cleveland. Well, I'll
no,
tell you,
it's here in Cleveland, which I know we have to get to the quarterbacks, but I want to throw a little bonus topic in here before we get to that.
Spencer Rattler.
No, because we're talking about the schedule. Have you heard that Roger Goodell wants to make the schedule um go to 18
Well,
games?
not only have I heard that, it's happening. And I think this is a genius move by the NFL because the NFL is all about adapting and it's all about marketing. The NFL is going to start on Labor Day weekend, which used to be a problem until this thing called smartphones became invented and apps became invented, and people can watch games wherever they're at, on the go, at parties, wherever. The NFL is such a giant now that it overtops the NBA, MLB, NHL combined, basically. And so I love the fact that they're going to do Labor Day weekend. There's an opportunity there that you could have a Thursday game. You could have a Friday game if you wanted to, what they're doing in Brazil. You could have a Saturday night primetime game if you wanted to. They could really take over that whole weekend. Not only that, but you're going to add an extra bye week for every team, which I'm assuming would be around the same time, like mid season, which would put the Super Bowl on what's usually a holiday for most companies, though some companies like mine consider President's Day a floating holiday. And that's putting the Super Bowl on President's Day weekend, which everybody has wanted for years. And I also think there's a real chance that in the future, Super Bowl Sunday may even become Super Bowl Saturday if they feel they can get more eyeballs on the product that way. The NFL is all about getting more eyeballs on the product.
I don't think they should move the Super Bowl off of Sunday because that's Sunday is the day everybody expects NFL football, so it makes sense to do that.
I am wondering this, and I agree with you. So if they don't do that, my question is, because it would be on a holiday, President's Day weekend, do you move the start of the game back to actual prime time, 8 p.m. Eastern?
You could, but here's my thing, because you know me, I love analyzing schedules, looking at does this road trip make sense for this team, and you know when do the prime time games happen, and when are the rivalry games and all that. I've always loved schedule analysis. It's one of my favorite parts of sports media and all that. Um, I understand how the schedule gets made. You know, the divisions are on a rotation. Like this year, the Browns are playing the NFC East. Next year, they'll play the NFC North. I get all that. And this year, the Browns are playing the AFC West. I think next year it's the AFC East and then Southwest again. Whatever. But where would that other game come from? Because I know why we're playing the Saints. It's because we finished in the same spot as them, third place in our division, third place in their division. Where would that extra game come from?
So I'm going to answer it in two ways. The first way is I think they'll do the exact same way they chose the 17th game, but just pick another division. So
From the opposite conference?
yes. So like the Browns would play the Saints because they're in the same spot. They already play the NFC East this year, so choose the North or West, and
They
that
would
would be
probably, in that example, they would probably go with the West because this season the Browns played the Bears from the NFC North because of that extra game. So
okay.
it, in that example, I think they would go with the NFC
And
West.
obviously, so the Browns, would every team would get 9 home and 9 away games. Um, the other answer I'm going to give you, and this is something that I have not heard a lot of talk about, is I think when the NFL goes to 18 games, they're not only going to expand the games, we know they're going to expand the roster. They're also going to expand the teams. I think the NFL is looking at a 34 team league potentially.
What two cities would you add in that
And
scenario?
I don't know because I don't think London is a smart idea, though I think Roger Goodell really wants it. I personally don't think it's a good idea. Maybe a team in Canada, I mean, the Buffalo region, they've had some games there. I think that could be a possibility. Um,
That is an interesting idea because Toronto has a team in the other three. Um,
yeah, maybe San Antonio as well. They have that huge Alamo Dome that they could use. Um,
what
so
about Louisville, Kentucky? Maybe.
it would work for the NFL, but I mean, because the market size don't matter. But will they be invested in football like they are? Because I think you got to go away from the big college towns, personally.
Okay. Then how? Okay. Then let me throw out one for you. Because Salt Lake City now has the NHL. They want to get Major League Baseball. They already have the NBA. Could they possibly get an NFL team?
I'd say it's possible, but you got to tell me they have a stadium that's already being built or is ready to go.
Okay. Um.
Because I don't know the answer to that one. I know Toronto has one. I know because, like I said, the Bills have played up there uh,
Right.
occasionally. and
Right,
San Antonio I know has one, so that's why those two came off the top of my head.
right.
Let's quickly get to talking about the six quarterbacks that were drafted in the first round. We mentioned Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, as well as JJ McCarthy. Out of those six, Josh, who had the best chance of succeeding?
Ooh, I would probably go with JJ McCarthy based off of the offensive system and the head coach he has, plus playing in a dome. Although Caleb Williams could be playing in a dome in the future. The Bears did release renderings of a dome. I want to get into that, but we can do that on a future show. Um, but nonetheless, I would go with JJ McCarthy in Minnesota.
Quick follow up for you when it comes to the Bears. I'm just curious. Is that in the city of Chicago, or is that like what they're going to do in Cleveland? Is that a suburb?
From what I understand, it would be in the city.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
So I'm going to shock everybody here. Because I actually think, because we talked about this prior to the draft, right? That usually two quarterbacks are superstars, two of them are pretty average, and two of them are bust. I actually think, because this is a historic draft class, and I think most of these quarterbacks landed in really good spots for mostly all of them. I think only one of them is going to fail. And I think that one's going to be Drake May. I think Drake May is, and no fault. If Drake May went to Minnesota, I think Drake May would succeed. I think New England, they did the polar opposite of what Belichick would do. They drafted almost all offense, besides one pick was a safety, I believe. They drafted receivers, they drafted backs, they drafted some linemen. So New England added talent around Drake May. It's just not high end talent. Now they need to spend some money. They have a defensive coach. Again, Chicago has one, but Chicago's got legitimate receivers. Washington has one, but they have a superstar OC, I think, in Cliff Kingsbury, who I think is a better offensive coordinator than head coach. They also have Terry McLaurin. I think Denver and Minnesota, for those two quarterbacks, I said it, whoever was going to land there was going to work. And I think Michael Penix in Atlanta, again, I think he has the infrastructure, and the fact that he's played in a dome will help him. Drake May being in that division with right now two other defensive head coaches, plus the Miami Dolphins, who are always going to be very talented and very fast with Mike McDaniel, plus the
and
fact
we know how difficult it is to go down to Miami and win.
that, and you got to play outside in the cold, and you got to deal with the AFC. Caleb Williams is in the NFC. Jane Daniels is in the NFC. Michael Penix is in the NFC. JJ McCarthy is in the NFC. Now,
Spen-
Bo,
even
now
though even though he went later in the draft, Spencer Rattler,
Spencer
he's in,
Rattler is in the
he,
NFC.
exactly.
Now,
Which I think.
Bo Nix
Go ahead.
is in the AFC, but as
Yes.
we talked about, he's with Sean Payton. Denver
Right.
already won 7 to 8 games. Like, he's probably going to be pretty good. I think Drake May. Now, I don't think New England's going to be terrible. I think it's on the board. They can improve. You know, they may not be the worst team in the league, 5, 6 wins. Like, I don't. I feel bad for the kid that he's in this situation. I think he's going to be the one that probably busts, but we've seen it all the time. Could Drake May be that elevator that just takes the Patriots back to prominence? I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it's impossible that that's not the case.
Yeah. For me, I questioning Jaden Daniels in Washington, not because of Jaden, just because of the current stadium situation with Washington. We know how crappy FedEx Field is, although I don't think FedEx is sponsoring that stadium anymore, so I have
I
no
don't
idea.
believe so either. I think it's just called Commander's Field or something.
Okay, either
No.
way, we know how bad the conditions are at that stadium. So that does have, and maybe I'm reading into that too much, but that has me a little concerned with Jaden Daniels. Plus, Washington's offensive line in the past, we saw Sam Howell had like no time to throw the ball. So, will Jaden Daniels have enough time to get the ball to Terry McLaurin and some of his other weapons?
So I think they made a big addition this offseason that nobody paid about at center. That was Tyler Biadasz, who came over from Dallas. And I do think that some of those sacks were on Sam Howell. They weren't all on the offensive line.
And I'm not trying to blame only the offensive line, but it does have me questioning a little bit. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do. And again, I think that Washington's a weird team where it's like it could be really good, it could be really bad, which more than likely means he's probably going to be okay. But I don't think he's going to bust flat out in Washington.
Right. No, I don't think so either. But if I had to choose a quarterback that has me like scratching my head in terms of like questions, it would be Jaden Daniels because of those things I mentioned.
Before we move on, I'm going to throw something so wild at you because you brought it up and tell me what you think about it.
Go ahead.
Week one, the starting quarterback for the New Orleans Saints is Spencer Rattler.
I was thinking that same thing.
I mean, the kid, and there's all this talk about, oh, this documentary, he messed up, yada, yada, yada. NFL teams couldn't get out of his head. I'm going to defend Spencer Rattler here because I didn't love him as a prospect. I thought, he was a third round pick. But when a dude is 15, they're not even halfway to grown up. I think he was 17 when the documentary came out, but we know kids make mistakes. I made dumb mistakes even in my 20s, and I'm 25, and I'm still making stupid mistakes to this day. And I think, he grew up and went to Oklahoma and was around Jalen Hurts. And I think that he could be the answer the Saints are waiting for because we know Derek Carr is not. But the problem with him is he is a defensive coach, and I think the Saints are a disaster and have no idea what they're doing. But again, Cincinnati was a disaster and didn't know what they were doing, and Joe Burrow saved the franchise. So you never know.
You're correct. Although who knows what Cincinnati's going to look like because T. Higgins has requested a trade and so has Trey Hendrickson.
I'll say this though, that Jermaine, and I know his last name starts with a B. I can't put my own name on it. The receiver they drafted out of Bama, he's a speedster. I think that that's their T. Higgins replacement, and I thought that was a hell of a pick by Cincinnati.
Okay, one more thing. Since you brought up receivers, I want to get to this super, super quick. What did you think? We know the questions surrounding the San Francisco 49ers when it comes to Deebo Samuel
Okay, good
and
point.
Brandon Ayuk. What did the 49ers do with their first round pick? They go and draft a wide receiver. Did that make your eyebrow go up?
A little bit. I thought it meant Ayuk was probably getting dealt more than Debo, which you know how I always feel about. Oh, I'm a wide back, Debo Samuel. I don't like the Niners or Debo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk, but I think you can never have enough weapons. And I think they may get traded a year or so down the line, but I think San Francisco will start this year by basically going all in and trying to win a Super Bowl with all of those weapons on their roster.
See, Dallas, that's how you go all in. What you did, that wasn't all in. I don't
But
know.
what do you mean? We got CD Lamb and we got Dak. And we brought back my son, Zeke.
Yay! We're going to go 12-5 again and then get eliminated in the wild card
Well,
round. Hooray!
because you don't have a running game and your whole offensive line is basically going to be rookies and you're playing a first place schedule.
Yeah.
So, I mean, do you go 10-7, 9-8? I mean, it's on the board right now.
Yeah, I could see. I kind of like what you're saying about Washington possibly jumping them.